want to welcome you all back to Startup Grind Houston. It's December. This is the month where you guys are all running around like a bunch of little elves trying to get ready for the holidays, no matter which one you celebrate. And when I was thinking about who would be the voice that we would want to end our year with, have the kind of conversation that sets us up for what we're wanting to do in 2025, there was only one person that was on that list. And thank God he said yes, because I was going to be in a pickle if he said no. So I'm bringing back Christian Ortiz. You guys have heard us talk a couple of times. And he's the founder of Justice AI. And that has evolved so much. All right. I'm just going to stop. We're going to start with the questions. We're going to get into a really great conversation. And my invitation to you, as you're listening to this, is to start asking yourself a couple of questions. What am I hearing these two talk about that I haven't quite heard said that way before? How does it help me navigate this next new year? And who do I need to evolve to be the leader we need in the startup community? So those are the three things I want you to be very intentionally thinking about as you're listening to Christian and I. So Christian, let's just dive in, because question one is a perfect way for us to start this conversation. How has the vision of Justice AI evolved since its inception, and what's driving that evolution?
That question, if you would have asked me a year ago, would have looked completely different, I think, right? When I first developed this software initially was to address systemic inequities within HR systems, corporations, and businesses, and maybe city governments, and people who really needed to build inclusive cultures. But what I quickly understood was that the individual who adopted the software was using it to learn and deconstruct from their own biases. So now the software it was twofold. Now an individual could purchase a standard version so that they could ask all the important questions that they couldn't ask their friends who were people of color or marginalized, and risking activating something within them, and they could have a safe space to learn how to understand how systemic inequities work and understand all of the questions without feeling dumb or judged for asking the questions that they should be asking. And then organizations started adopting it, and I started bringing it to them across a multitude of industries like real estate, and identifying biases in their listings, to dermatology offices, where they were misdiagnosing skin conditions for people of color. And then I started realizing the actual potential of what an ethical AI system actually has the potential of doing in the real world. And it's changed everything for me. And so the driver behind that, to your question, is how much more how many more bounds can I push? How much more can I see? How much more change can I bring to the world with a system like this, which is really it's in its infancy, because we haven't even gotten to AGI, ASI, all of these super massive intelligence systems that are on the way. And what we've been able to do with Justice AI is just incredible.
I love how you pointed out one of the important things that you learned was the individual's journey. You know, when I was listening to that, what was coming to me as a leadership advisor, because it's something I talk about so often, is it's so important for people to understand and recognize that even though they're leading teams, even though they're leading companies, they're also leading themselves. And you and I both know change starts internally first.
It really
So
does.
many people try to do it externally. They try to change behaviors without doing any of the inner work. And so
That's right.
I love that that's started developing a pathway for individuals to do their own inner work, because now they're going to start asking better questions as leaders in their startup.
Absolutely. And that's kind of where the value comes in, even for small businesses who want to diversify their markets. How do you compete as a small business to a Fortune 500 company who's shoveling cash into their, you know, no matter how much cash a Fortune 500 company shoves into their marketing, they're still marketing it wrong. So, as small businesses with a tool that builds real equitable marketing, it is a workaround where you're reaching audiences that are more human, more relatable. You're not missing the mark with anybody who you're marketing your business towards. And so the tool becomes this revolutionary, just that, a tool that we are now discovering can be used in a multitude of ways.
So, in that journey, often what happens is things are initiated and sparked, obviously, that we don't expect, because that's part of the learning path. So, what's been the most surprising lessons and pivots that you've encountered as Justice AI continues to evolve?
That is a phenomenal question. And I hate to admit it at times, but it's also a testament to the beauty of how imperfect we are as humans. When I first started marketing Justice AI, I was using language speaking to people thinking that they understood everything, only to find out that the majority of my audience had no clue what a bias was, what systemic racism is, what internalized oppression is, what colorism is, misogyny, misogynoir, all of these concepts that I was like trying to educate my audience for. They were like, that's cool, but what the hell does that mean? And I kept running into that question and I said, oh, uh-oh. I was like, I'm understanding now. These are, and it makes sense, right? These are concepts that they're not prioritized. They're not prioritized in our education. We've just been learning the terminology collectively, little by little, in pockets of social media, interactions with individuals, by a fluke. You're scrolling down your feed and you're like, what does that term mean? And who is this
Well,
person?
and the terminology is evolving too.
That's right. And it's constantly evolving, and we're finding better terms in the fight. And so, as I was collaborating with all of my experts to develop this IP for this programming of Justice I was working with experts from across the field, people who've been in DEI for over 30 years, since before DEI was a massive global conversation. And they all contributed their knowledge base, their books and their online documents. We met for hours collectively in the hundreds to be like, okay, today we're going to talk about this. What's relevant today? What's relevant for the past that people need to understand? How did this evolve? And that was for every topic. And so you get in a habit of understanding and talking about all these things. And as you're learning, you automatically assume that everyone already knows. And so one of the biggest challenges that I ran into was understanding and implementing that empathy piece to understand that the people who are the most hateful are the ones that know the least. And when I understood that, then I was able to reformulate my marketing to be able to make it more relatable, instead of saying like, use Justice AI to do such and such and such and such. Just today, I posted something on LinkedIn just a few minutes before we got on that said, I surveyed over 100 people about their best prompts that have changed their life. Here are the top 10. And they were all relatable questions that I think a lot of white people specifically can relate to be like, holy crap, now I understand how to use the software. And so it's been a huge pivot, but it's also been a learning experience from a human perspective, which has been the most beautiful thing for me.
Yes, yes, because another thing that's surfacing this year, and I'm not sure how that shows up for you, is because I'm constantly looking at where are people's misunderstandings and meanings. That's literally the mission for verbal vortexes is navigating the waters of meaning and misunderstanding. And I'm like going, okay, there's a lot of them. you could literally stand here and give everyone a fishing pole and you'd have thousands of fishing poles. And I thought, all right, there's got to be somewhere we can initiate a conversation without feeling like you're constantly going to be just throwing bait out into the water. And I
Right.
thought to myself, ah, where are my needs and where are my audience's needs? And how do I create environments that nurture and nourish my needs, the intellectual, the deeply spiritual woman who's, easily taps into generations of wisdom and knowledge. I need to change my environments.
That's right.
I need to create environments that support me because then it's easier for me to create micro environments for people who are in different phases of their spectrum of learning.
That's right. And I love the that you named it verbal vortexes, because I think words, and as you and I just talked about, terminology, not only that's evolving, but the conversations that we have, the power of conversation and understanding perspectives has just been such a massive part of our growth as a company, and for me personally as a human being. My Oya Mira newsletter on LinkedIn started off as inclusive marketing's, perspectives, I guess I should say. And it's become a tool where individuals who want to learn about these concepts can go to. And it's been such a great eye opener for me because I get to read the comments and see what's triggering people. How does it make people react, and how do they resonate? And it's of course all the things, but words are such a powerful, necessary component to this entire fight for collective liberation.
Well, I don't know if anybody's told you this or not, but when I hear you say, "Oh, Amita," I feel like you're inviting me to the table to sit down.
Yes, and that is exactly the point, right? It is for them. It's also not in English. It's not standard that you hear a welcome like that. And it was specifically designed. I thought about, like, how would my uncles sit you down to the table to have this conversation? And my uncles would be like, "Oye, mira, ven aquí," right? Like, come here, like, siéntate, let's go. And I would take it growing up like, "Oh crap, I'm in trouble." But there were also ways to be like, "Oye, mira, ven aquí," right? Like, it's a friendly invitation to be like, "Hey, you, I'm talking to you," right? So, "Hey, look." Uh, and it just became this really cool tagline that ended up changing a lot of my socials to, because everybody knew me as the Oye, mira guy. And so it's finding these creative ways to also open those conversations is just, it's been life changing, because I'm already an aggressive looking fella that already, I make people uncomfortable when I walk into a room. So you and I spoke a little bit about this in our last conversation. It's like, how did I need to find the balance where I recognize I'm a 6'2" gigantic Latino man who already doesn't have a lot of representation in the field. So I'm already being questioned as I'm walking through the door, especially having an online presence. They're going to be like, "Who is this guy?" Right. And so you have to become relatable. You have to be human. You have to open the doors in ways that you challenge everyone, but you ultimately lead with the love that's needed to deliver the message, because I want them to hear me, not just, listen.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and speaking of hearing, when you're exploring and you're looking at the challenges that are happening, and you take those consistent actions every day, because we're watching you do that. And thank you for modeling that, because there are times people would not believe me if I told them, but there are times I just want to give up.
Get
I'm
it.
like, and so by seeing you continuously model that, I'm like, going, okay, I can't do that. He's not doing that. I'm not going to do it. All right. Then I reground myself and all the other stuff. All right. So in that journey, in that exploration, What are some of the institutional blind spots that you've observed in the tech industry regarding justice and equity? And how does the Justice AI aim to illuminate and address them?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. The same way that, we talk about AI being a true reflection of society. It is a reflection of our best, or really our best, and most importantly, our worst selves, right? And so, in that same light, when we look at what I was just explaining earlier about discovering that most people don't know what's really at play when it comes to justice and all of that, it's the same reason why Eurocentric Western data in the masses was used as the training data from the global north to train these systems. And so what I found is that we were stuck in this state of awareness. Everybody, how many thousands on LinkedIn alone do you hear people say AI is biased? There's bias in these systems. There's bias, bias, bias. But what are you doing about it? And do you know where it's coming from? Which was the biggest question for me. Because I kept hearing these conversations even before I started Justice AI. It was, luckily for me, I also got invited to do beta testing for ChatGPT 3.5 when it was about to launch. And I was like, this is fantastic, but holy shit, it's also problematic. So, what are we going to do about this? I knew where these things were coming from, but the majority of people know. So, the conversations had to be, do you know where these biases are actually coming from? And people had no idea. And so what happens is what the revelation for me was that whether they knew or not, the concept of addressing white supremacy was being left out of the conversation. Nobody wanted to touch it, which was, it could be terrible if you look at it that way. It could be terrible. You could be like, why is nobody talking about it? But I said, you know what? This is also an opportunity. Whenever you're met with something that's not being addressed, if you have the gall, address it. And so that's kind of what led to the dedication to the work. I had to sit back to your point. I can't tell you how many days I logged onto my computer and say, why am I doing this? What am I accomplishing? I just want to give it up and be a food influencer, eat in my car and make TikToks because I know that that's what sells and that's what is safe for everybody. But in the concept of safety, in order to have safe spaces, you have to have brave ones. And bravery takes consistency and it takes meeting the grit and the shit that comes with all of this work and being able to say, you know what, I get it. I get it. And you're not going to get it today, but guess what? You'll get it tomorrow. If you don't get it tomorrow, you're going to get it in a month from now. Maybe you'll never get it, but guess what? Somebody else will if you don't, right? So it's picking your battles. It's understanding that you have, and there's so much realistic psychological things that are also at play where we talk about the concepts. We can't force anybody to do something they're not ready to do. We have no ability to control people. So what I say going into all of these conversations is I welcome your curiosity, more importantly, your discomfort. I can't force you to do anything that you don't want to do, but hopefully by the end of if you stick with me, hopefully you'll be inspired enough to understand what the actual mission is, and then you'll stick around. And if you don't, cool, bye. There's 8 billion of you. Like all I need is this little bit to be realistic. We only need a piece of the pie to make the greater good and the greater change. And so I had to really reformulate my approach to understand that there's going to be very little who stick around with the concepts and the conversations that I have and the way that I poke and prod and challenge white folks and even people of color who have internalized biases that they have no idea about. We know this, and it becomes this beautiful journey of self-discovery for myself and the creators who are creating this content, and it becomes this transformational beautiful experience for the recipient of the information. Because when I see the 1 out of 100 really get the message, I see their brains in real time morphing and changing, and their minds are being blown and they're like, why haven't I not seen this before? And it just gives me the hope that I need to keep going because um, deconstruction and transformation is one of the hardest things that we can do. And I speak from experience. I grew up in a hyper patriarchal, hyper Catholic, hyper masculine home that was homophobic, transphobic, racist, all, Latino household who also dealt with colorism because I was the only one who was half Mexican. My Puerto Rican family was just like, Mexicano, and it was all judgy and fingers. And so my deconstruction from pulling away from religion, from pulling away from toxicity, from understanding that it's okay to be gay, it's okay to date hippopotamus if that's what you're into. Like the whole deconstruction of society was the most brutal thing for me because I was so conditioned into believing what I believed. And when you go through that deconstruction yourself, it's so easy to understand why people miss the mark and are afraid to even take the next step. And so this conversation, it's not even about tech, it's about society, right? And it's about humanity. And this is the thing that people miss about artificial intelligence. It's not artificial, it's a reflection, and it is a reflection of our humanity. And this is where the intersection comes in, where the beautiful, massive concept of what I'm actually doing comes to light.
Ah, giving everybody space to breathe there. You know,
Yeah.
one of the things that I kind of giggled at a little bit as I was listening was how often humanity and conversations will follow along in parallel with the journeys that we're taking, especially as we're modeling a really different kind of leadership. Because you talked about listening, and we're constantly being judged. And I laughed and I said, yeah, kind of like the listen, don't judge that was happening on TikTok. And I was
Yes,
like,
we
as I
listen and we
watched some
don't
of those
judge.
videos, I was like, "Ooh, you guys are learning some real ish about each other in the moment." Yeah,
In
I
real
really wish
time.
you'd taken some of my workshops and master class.
It's fantastic. Yes. Yeah, we listen and we don't judge. I need to do a TikTok series on Justice AI prompts.
Ooh, that would be good.
That
That
would
would
be
be good.
super good.
All right. So, what kind of advice would you give founders who are listening today, or even listen to the recording afterwards, that they're seeking to build a purpose driven business that can sustain both impact and profit? Because we are still living in an economic environment that if there's not profit there, people aren't going to buy into it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that that's not only a phenomenal question for founders, but what I found is that CEOs who have been in the business for decades, when we talk about equity and building inclusive cultures and DEI and all of the things that are now under attack and under scrutiny, I came to find out that the reason why they're pulling away from it is because they didn't know how to do it the right way. And I was coming in with this, we listen and we don't judge, but I was judging. I was like, listen, I'm listening and I'm judging because what I'm hearing is that you just don't want to do it. But what I came to realize truly from some of the biggest corporations that I've been talking to is that they don't know how to do it right. And when we go into this, when we're in a capitalist system and the way society conditions us, they condition us to believe that we have to be experts in what we know. And if we're not experts, and if we come to the table not knowing a single thing, and you admit that you don't know anything about what's being talked about, you're now being seen and looked at as stupid. It is not even a nice stupid. It's just you're dumb. Like, how did you get here is the question that comes out. with
You're
no
immediately dismissed.
immediately, especially if you're a woman, especially if you're a black woman, indigenous man, black man, you're automatically looked down upon. That's just the way we've been conditioned as a society. With that being said, I've had to take a lot of deep breaths and realize that I was challenging the lack of knowledge from people in some of the highest positions, mixed with their ego. And so, what the conversation becomes, somebody told me this not too long ago, and I adopted it forever moving forward. Just give me 10% of your ego, and I promise you, you'll see the light at the end of the tunnel. When they told me that, is how they approach these executives and these CEOs, they're driving with their ego. They're driving with this false sense of knowledge. Now they're being fed something, a product that they have no idea how it works. And so my addition to that conversation is also, CEO says, well, what's my ROI and DEI? And I know I'm venturing a little bit off from the main question, but I'm going to circle back to all of it. I'm saying all of this because it's going to tie in. The CEO will say, well, even the startup person, what's my ROI and DEI? What's my return on investment? Right? I always say, show me the data where DEI doesn't work, where DEI doesn't increase your value. Show me that data, and then we can have an honest conversation about it. Until then, you can't question whether DEI works or not. You just don't know how it works, and you don't know how to do it the right way. When that conversation comes up, the ego now is battered, bruised, damaged, butt hurt. It's triggered. It's how dare you? And then, are you listening at that point? And at that very, very moment, me as an executive who's doing the work, I have to just wait it out, and I have to wait until they regulate. And then, like raising a child who's just been scolded, they have to co-regulate with you, because when they see that they're not getting a reaction from you, then they say, okay, show me what this thing does. Show me the data. Show me how to do this the right way. Right. And so it becomes this challenge of the way that we've been conditioned. So I say all of that to say that when we become starters, the goal is to become the executive of our own dreams. The goal is to be the CEO of our own passions. But when you get up there, are you going to be willing to have these crucial conversations when you're challenged with things that you don't know? Are you going to be able to handle it like the CEO that you should be, like the executive that you should be? And that is where the challenge comes. So that story has to be told, because when they get to that level, we're not conditioned to believe, okay, you're right, maybe DEI does have a value. Let's talk about it. That's not the approach, right? So there has been a lot of learning from me as a consultant, as an executive, somebody who's owning 2 businesses, who's all focused on DEIBA work through capitalism. And like you and I were talking about earlier, I think the challenge for a lot of startups especially is, how do I get from point A to point Z as fast as I can? And when you do that, you're eliminating all of the ethical steps that you need to take within your business. And let's just be honest, most of us are shitty CEOs or shitty entrepreneurs. It's just the facts. When you are doing it for profit, when you're doing it to get from point A to point Z because you are so impatient, and I get it. And I always say, to circle back to your original question, my advice to the startup is, lead with your integrity, take that integrity and drive it with conviction, enjoy the process, and be patient, because rushing it is not sustainable. And that is a hard lesson to teach.
Yeah.
Also, don't lead with desperation.
Yes.
Never lead with desperation, lead with conviction. If we have the ability to believe in a sky daddy, no offense to anybody, then we can believe that the process is going to work within ourselves when we lead with our conviction, if we know that our integrity is truly driving what we're trying to drive. If you really believe in your product, if you really believe in yourself, if you really believe in the mission, it is going to work. It is just a matter of when and where. And sometimes we can afford to be in limbo. Sometimes we might be homeless in a car with a Wi-Fi hotspot in a coffee shop, still trying to do what we do. I've seen all of it. I've seen every extreme. I've seen people create businesses literally homeless within their car with a laptop that's on its last life, stealing Wi-Fi from a Walmart. It's how much do we believe in the mission? How much do we believe in the power of what we're sitting with? It is the ultimate challenge that we face as entrepreneurs, and is the ugliest, roughest part of it all. It is not pretty, it is not anything to glorify, but it is just the reality of where we are and what this takes, right, to build what we need to build.
It can be the current reality, and I'm actually here to help us create a different belief system that allows us to bridge the current reality with the future reality, because how we show up with that integrity and that compassion gives us the space to also change our behavior so that we can start rewarding the people who are taking the actions to create the future solutions, instead of rewarding the ones who are breaking everything down and
Yes.
stealing from everybody who's part of it.
100%. 100%. This is where the intersection of social justice and entrepreneurship in a capitalist system, when we're fighting against the very system that we're playing a part of, the question comes up, how the hell do I juggle this? And the reality is we're never going to really dismantle the system that we're in. We're too far in. If the experiment of the United States experiment is going to continue, it's not going anywhere. So how do we reform it? How do we become champions of the movement? And how do we normalize it? And it's doing these conversations. It's more and more and more and more with like-minded individuals who are in the same boat, who are struggling with the same battles. And it's part of it, right? And so I'm gonna end by this entire thing right now just by saying I myself cannot expect change if I'm not going to be a proponent of the change. I cannot expect anything to change, anything to reform, if I'm not normalizing these conversations, if I'm not bringing the data to the table to those who look at me with a questionable eye, if I'm not bringing real knowledge and numbers and experiences and all of the things, right? So the consistency has to be there. We have to keep going. Otherwise, we get washed out. Like so many of us have been in the past. We get flooded out, we get drowned out, and I cannot allow that to happen. I refuse.
In history, people've been dismissed, burned out, and killed. And now we have an opportunity to actually create space for them to thrive in order for the experiment to actually come to fruition. And
Yes.
Justice AI is a huge piece that will help us accomplish that. So thank you for doing the work.
It's my pleasure. The ultimate concept of Justice AI, going back to your very first question, how has this evolved and where is it today? I can honestly say that it is my gift to the world as a safe space to ask the hardest questions in the privacy of your own home or office or on your cell phone on a train. The minute that something is, you're struggling with the concept and you need a definitive answer, you can trust the system once and for all, who's been programmed by experts from the global south. And it also, it includes, Eurocentric Western data. It includes it all because it all matters, and every perspective deserves a seat at the table. And that's what this does. It brings every perspective that needs to be brought to the table to help you make the best ethical decision. And so when it paints it, it also doesn't coddle fragility, it doesn't coddle whiteness. So you can go at it all you want with all of these arguments, but it is going to push back always with ethical answers based off actual facts and factual information and data, which is, it's amazing. It's simply amazing. And so when we look at it as our safe space, then it really has a potential of just making massive change. And so I've coined the term automated activism. That's the goal. I want the more companies to use it, you automatically start decolonizing these systems and making them more ethical without even the effort of a human intuition. It automatically prompts ethical behavior and teaches these things. And so, I'm sitting here like, how much more can I tell all of you? Like, get the software. It's there. It's fantastic. It's frustrating. I wish everybody's eyes would just be like, oh, it's just about the consistency of the marketing.
Definitely given everybody a lot to think about, some really good questions to ask themselves. And I would just say, how about just make it your, I get it, my audience all has different kind of holidays. I'm just going to go with the major one right now. I don't practice it, so I'm saying that ahead of time. But
Right.
this is what's on everybody's mind. So why don't you just give yourself Justice AI for Christmas and play with it for a month?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll be honest, if I've had individuals who've come to me and say, I just can't afford it. I need this in my life, but I can't afford it. Just talk to me. I get you access. Like, this is also a way to not only democratize AI, but I also understand that there are subsets of individuals who right now can't afford it. They're struggling with the realities of life. And so I work with people, right, to really get them access to this if they're really willing to use it for the better good, right? That's kind of like, it's kind of the trade-off, right? Like, I just don't want you to have it just to use it once and put it in the closet and be like, oh, that's too much, right? Like, if you're really dedicated to making the real world change and seeing what this thing can do, absolutely just reach out to me. I hope of all people, you could tell everyone, I try to make myself as easily accessible as I possibly can. If you don't have my phone number or email or my DMs, and if I don't respond, then I'm either in a ditch somewhere or sick. Like, I am easy to reach out to. I'm not some public figure. I will never be some public figure where I become detached from reality. I came from really absolutely nothing. And this mission of mine is so important to me. I can't just close the doors when I want to close the doors, right? So the door has to be open for as many people as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Again,
much.
another solid conversation that people can just literally be walking around, musing on, and taking small incremental actions from. Christian, you're wonderful. We appreciate you over here at Startup Grind Houston.
I appreciate you all. Thank you so much.